Hello! We're going to start our first day of trying to flip our classroom for this unit. So you guys will be responsible for listening to the podcast in the evening, taking notes, and then during class time we'll have the opportunity to practice and discuss all of that we learned the night before. So please be on top of your homework and get your notes taken and done and review that information through the readings, and then we'll do different class activities. So we're taking a look today at the kidney structures for the most part and their functions in general. On the screen there you'll see that it says, what do we want and how do we get it? So this actually came from my son's Boy Scout trip. They were in Oregon. It was a very hot summer week that they were at camp, and so the camp counselors would holler at the kids, what do we want? And the kids would have to say, clear pee. And then they'd say, how do we get it? And then they'd tell them, the kids would yell, drink water. So they go, what do we want? Clear pee. How do we get it? Drink water. So that is kind of the key to making your kidneys function appropriately. So I thought that was a good way to start our kidney lecture for the day. So we're going to take a look first of all at the functions of the kidneys. One of the major functions of the kidneys is that they remove metabolic wastes from the blood, and excrete them to the outside. Second function of the kidneys is that they help to control the rate of red blood cell formation, or RBC formation, by secreting erythropoietin. So erythro meaning red blood cells, or red. So your kidneys are very sensitive to a lack of oxygen, so they tell the bone marrow to make more red blood cells when there's a decreased amount of oxygen. We've talked about that several times this year. Kidneys also help to regulate blood pressure by secreting renin, so they balance out the blood pressure. They help to regulate the absorption of calcium ions by activating vitamin D. And the kidneys also regulate the volume, composition, and pH of body fluid, and they form urine. So if at any point during this podcast I'm getting too fast in the notes, you can always pause it to take notes and continue on. So looking at our location of our kidneys, those of you that went to Body Worlds with us this year, 2012, we saw kidneys in several of the different specimens that were preserved. They are found on either side of the vertebral column. They are what are considered retroperitoneally located. So remember we talked about the peritoneum is the lining of the abdominal cavity. So these are retro, or behind the lining of the abdominal cavity. They are surrounded by fat, kind of a cushiony layer that protects them. The upper border of the kidneys is at about the 12th thoracic vertebra, and the lower border of the kidneys sits at around the 3rd lumbar vertebra. And the left kidney is 1.5 to 2 centimeters higher than the right kidney. So taking a look at our kidney diagram, the outer portion of the kidney is surrounded by the renal capsule. When we look at the blood flow being very pertinent to how the kidneys, or why the kidneys function as they do, we have the renal artery is going to be the more rounded blood vessel bringing blood into the kidneys, and then the renal vein is the more flattened one, remembering that they have less smooth muscle. And so that brings blood out of the kidneys. The ureter will bring the urine out of the kidneys and bring it down to the urinary bladder. This layer right there is kind of that bubbly tissue right here is the renal cortex. So it goes renal capsule, renal cortex is this outermost layer. And then some structures that we see in this next layer is called the renal pyramids. So you can see how they're pyramidal shaped. And those are found in the area called the renal medulla. So really the renal medulla is kind of like from here to here. So it goes renal cortex and then renal medulla. And then this area where the kind of granular looking tissue dips down in between the pyramids is called the renal columns. And then where the nephrons, the functional unit of the kidneys, work, which we see all through here, those drain into the renal pelvis, which then go down into the ureter. And lastly, this little open space, sinuses or spaces. You can probably guess what renal means at this point. So renal has to do with or pertaining to the kidney. So this space right here where the blood vessels are going in and out is the renal sinus. So taking a look at our blood supply to our kidneys now, there's some key structures going in and out of the kidneys. So I showed you the renal artery and renal vein. Those are going to branch until eventually they get down to the smallest parts of the blood going into the kidneys, and that's the afferent arteriole brings blood in from the renal artery. So we're going to kind of skip all those other branches in between there. And then it's going to travel into the glomerulus. So we have blood coming in the afferent arteriole. It goes into this kind of ball-shaped capillary bed called the glomerulus. So it's knot-like, kind of shaped like a knot. And it's a high-pressure capillary bed that's the site for blood filtration. Then blood leaves, and this is kind of interesting because usually in a capillary bed, blood will go in through an artery and out through a venule. So in this case, we're going in through an arteriole and out through an arteriole. So blood leaves through the efferent arteriole, and it's a narrow vessel that restricts blood flow, and that's actually what's going to help to generate the high pressure that we find in the glomerulus. So it's a big opening in and a small opening out, so we're going to pressurize the glomerulus a little better. And then these aren't in the pictures, but there's also a peritubular capillaries that are a low pressure capillary bed that runs around the convoluted tubules, and it absorbs fluid from them. And then another area of blood vessels called the vasa recta, which are unbranched capillaries that are similar in shape to the loops of Henle, with a descending limb and an ascending limb. And I'd like you at this point now to click on this YouTube video, but if that doesn't work, which actually I'm having a feeling it probably won't work, perhaps you can copy this information down and then open it in your own browser. Sorry, one last one. The venules. The venules are going to carry blood to the renal vein, so all the way out of the kidney completely. So what we were just talking about, we're looking at, our big kidney picture. So our cortex is the outside, our medulla is the inside. If I was to take one of these little lines out of here and one of these little dots out of here and blew it up, it would look like this. So this is our nephron. So our functional unit of our kidney. So the area that's in yellow is kidney tissue, and then the area that's in red and blue is obviously our blood tissues. So you can see how it is really working together and ever so closely transferring particles back and forth between all of the different parts. So that ends our discussion of the major kidney parts for today. So you should be a good portion of the way through the first and second page of the notes. Oh, sorry. So there's a couple things to label on the notes. So we have the Bowman's capsule, the glomerulus, the afferent arteriole, and then down here, this is our proximal convoluted tubule, our Bowman's capsule, and then down here is called the loop of Henle, and we also see the loop of Henle over here. So take a look at those different parts, and next class we'll talk more about the structure of the nephron and how it functions.